When I arrived there, the suitcase was still on the ground, so I observed the suitcase. Then I briefly left the scene while they did some further excavation. Then I came back and watched them actually remove the suitcase from the ground.
Just so that we're entirely clear, it was later confirmed that you were dealing with, in this post-mortem, Ms. Grace Millane.
Yes.
In December 2018, a young woman sets off on a trip of a lifetime. A year exploring the world after finishing university and before settling into a career. She was bright, compassionate, and full of promise. But just days after arriving in New Zealand, that promise was gone, replaced by headlines, heartbreak, and horror. This is the story of Grace Millane. Grace Millane was born in Essex, England, in 1996, the youngest of 3 children to parents David and Gillian. She grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and creativity. Her family described her as outgoing, artistic, and full of compassion, the kind of person who lit up every room. After graduating from the University of Lincoln with a degree in advertising and marketing, she decided to travel the world before beginning her career. Before leaving, she chopped off some of her long hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust, a children's cancer charity, the sort of thoughtful gesture that defined her. In October 2018, she left home with her backpack, camera, and a year of adventure ahead. She backpacked across South America, visiting Peru, and meeting fellow travelers along the way. Always meeting new friends, sharing new stories, and having great experiences. Her family received constant photos and messages along the way. She was never out of touch. She was having the time of her life. She then arrived in New Zealand. It would be the final leg of her journey. On December the 1st, 2018, Grace checked into a hostel in central Auckland. That evening, she put on a black dress and white trainers and walked out the door to meet someone she'd matched with on Tinder. At first, she wasn't sure about going, but after more chatting, she agreed. She left to meet her date, a 26-year-old oil manager who lived in a hotel. The pair met at Sky City, a buzzing entertainment complex of bars and restaurants. CCTV caught them laughing, smiling, ordering drinks. Grace even texted a friend, "I clicked with him so well." It all seemed so normal, at least on the surface. Later that night, the two moved to another bar, the Bluestone Room. They talked, kissed, and looked like any other young couple enjoying each other's company. The two were seen leaving the bar together, arm in arm, and heading towards a nearby hotel. They took the lift together and went to room 308 on the 3rd floor. This was the last time Grace Millane was ever seen alive again. December the 2nd, 2018. Today was Grace's 22nd birthday. Friends and family sent messages, but none were read. Her phone went silent, straight to voicemail, no reply. Grace's parents knew immediately that something was wrong. She was always in touch, always sharing updates. By the 3rd day, panic set in. Grace never went this long without contact. Her parents reported her missing.
We begin tonight with a public appeal for missing British backpacker Grace Millane. A short time ago, police held a press conference to appeal for sightings of the 22-year-old who has not been seen since 7:15 p.m. on Saturday night.
Police searched her hostel. Everything she owned was still there. Her passport, her suitcase, her clothes. So where was Grace? And where and who was the man she met that night? Detectives quickly traced her last steps through hours of city CCTV. It didn't take long to find the answer. The same man leaving the bar with Grace had commented on her Facebook profile photo the very night she vanished, writing, "Beautiful, very radiant." His name? Jesse Kempson, 26 years old, living at the City Life Hotel. When the police managed to get him in for routine questions, he appeared calm, even helpful.
How did the evening pan out? Yeah, pretty good.
He told them that they'd had a nice night, parted ways around 10 p.m, and that was that. He said he tried to message her the next day, but she had unmatched him on Tinder, so he accepted he would no longer be seeing her and moved on. But as he spoke, officers were already reviewing the hotel footage. And very quickly, the footage was not matching with his version of events. Grace and Jesse entering the lift together. The doors close. She leaves the lift with him, but never returns. So why was Jesse pretending they'd parted ways? He clearly was lying. Detectives looked into Jesse some more. Jesse was born in Wellington and had moved around a lot as a child after his parents split up. He had been mainly raised by his grandparents and didn't have much to do with the rest of his family. Many in his family thought he was a compulsive liar. He'd make up stories claiming he was suffering from cancer, even lying to employers, landlords and partners. When his lies were found out, he would often be evicted or lose his job. A previous landlord said that he lied about being a pro softball player who played for New Zealand's national team, the Black Sox. Jesse said he was waiting on contract money and he would pay the rent when he received it. After weeks of waiting, the landlord contacted the club and found out it was all a lie. They'd never even heard of him. In the current hotel, City Life, he had told them he was a highly paid Woolworths manager. But the truth was, he was unemployed and on benefits. He had only recently been fired from his telesales job for lying again. This happened on the actual day he met Grace. He was never an oil manager. Over the next few days, detectives followed every move that Jesse made after that night. What they found was chilling. He'd gone shopping for a large suitcase and cleaning supplies. He rented a red Toyota Corolla. He even met another Tinder date. She later said to the police he was casually chatting about burying bodies and police friends. She felt so unsettled by him, she refused to get into his car and made her own way home and did not talk to him again. Jesse later hired a carpet cleaner machine and took it to his room in the hotel. He told staff he wanted to clean some red wine stains he had made. Later that evening, Jesse used a trolley to transport 2 suitcases. He then loaded them into the rental car and left the parking lot. The next day he was caught on camera buying a shovel. Then sometime later, he went and cleaned the car before returning it to the rental company. On the 5th of December, Jesse visited different areas to throw away items into different bins. Police came to the hotel that day to talk to him. As soon as he saw the police, he turned around and started to walk away. The police saw him, chased him down, and brought him in to answer some questions. When police confronted him again, he insisted nothing had happened, that Grace had left alive. But the evidence was overwhelming. Police searched his room. Grace's father arrived in Auckland on December the 7th and gave a press conference, pleading for help to find his daughter.
Thank you for coming today. As you know, Grace has been missing for several days. We last had contact with her on Saturday the 1st of December, and as a family we've been extremely concerned for her welfare. Grace is a lovely, outgoing, fun-loving, family-orientated daughter.
They arrested Jesse on December the 8th. His story had now changed.
I don't know, I was all over the place. You come out of the shower,
Yep.
the light's been on in the shower,
Yep.
you put a towel around you, you've turned the light off, and then you've returned to your bed and you've gone to sleep in your bed.
Yep.
And at that point, when you exit the shower, you don't look around, but your assumption from the silence.
I thought that she had gone.
He claimed it was all an accident, and things had gone too far. He said he panicked, not knowing what to do. He put her body in a suitcase and drove out to bury her. Forensic evidence was overwhelming. Jesse's crude attempt to clean up made no difference. Grace's blood was all over the hotel room floor. With the information he had given, hours later, police found a shallow grave off Scenic Drive, west of Auckland. Inside the grave was a suitcase, and inside the suitcase was the body of Grace Millane.
The area was identified late last night as a location of interest as a result of our investigative work. I can now advise that a short time ago we located a body which we believe to be Grace.
The news shocked the nation. Many people laid flowers and held vigils. The New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly apologised to Grace's parents.
On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Jesse Kempson was charged with the murder of Grace Millane. On December the 10th, Jesse appeared in court in Auckland. After an autopsy, the pathologist stated that Grace had been strangled and had bruising on her chest and arms, likely from being pinned down.
There was an area of significant bruising, and it was on the left side of the neck, and it basically extended from the jaw down. If you look at your own neck, there's a very broad band of muscle which comes down the side of your neck called sternomastoid muscle. So the bruising was to the midline of that, or just over more towards the right. There has been sufficient pressure in that place for a sufficient period of time and for sufficient force for that bruising to occur.
After killing her, Jesse looked up locations on his phone, including the one he would eventually dispose Grace's body. He then looked at pornography and, sickeningly, took intimate photos of Grace's lifeless body. And then he went on another date. Was this really panic? Or was it something much darker? Grace's funeral was held at Brentwood Cathedral, with hundreds in attendance. In November 2019, Jesse Kempson went on trial for murder. His lawyers claimed Grace's death was a tragic accident, but prosecutors argued it was deliberate, sustained, and cruel. After just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. Kempson was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 17 years.
The verdict of murder today will be welcomed by every member of the Millane family and friends of Grace. It will not reduce the pain, the suffering that we've had to endure for over the past year.
In the months that followed, 2 other women came forward. Both said Jesse Kempson had abused or assaulted them before Grace's murder. He was found guilty again, twice, adding 11 years to his sentence. For Grace's family, justice was cold comfort. Her father, David Millane, said, "The terror and pain she must have experienced at your hands, as a mother and father, it will haunt us forever." A year later, David passed away after a battle with cancer, never recovering from losing his daughter. Out of grief, Grace's family built something meaningful: They launched the Love Grace campaign, collecting handbags filled with the essentials for women escaping abuse. They also raised thousands for the White Ribbon campaign, working to end male violence against women. Grace Millane was more than just a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, with a camera strap across her shoulder and a year of stories ahead of her. She laughed loudly and gave generously. We tell these stories so names like Grace Millane are not reduced to a case file, but held as a life lived and never forgotten. Midlothian, Texas, a peaceful community just south of Dallas, where a crime so strange, so chilling, still leaves investigators and armchair detectives baffled nearly a decade later. In the early hours of April the 18th, 2016, 45-year-old fitness instructor Missy Bevers arrived at a local church to set up for her morning boot camp class. She was dedicated, loved by her students, and never missed a session. But that morning, someone was already inside. Security cameras captured an unsettling figure moving through the church corridors, dressed in full tactical gear, as if impersonating a police officer. The person wandered room to room, breaking glass, opening doors, and methodically searching the building. Their identity has never been discovered, and their purpose that morning remains unknown. Just minutes later, Missy entered the same building. And what happened next would shock Midlothian, Texas, to its core. Tonight, we explore the murder of Missy Bevers. "45-year-old Terry Leanne Missy Bevers was born on August the 9th, 1970, in Graham, Texas, to parents James and Norma Strickland. She grew up in a small city of Jacksboro with her two brothers, Clifford and Clint. From an early age, Missy was known for her bright smile, her kindness, and her ability to make friends wherever she went. She was outgoing, fun-loving, and full of energy. After graduating from Jacksboro High School in 1988, Missy attended Tarleton State University, earning a degree in science. Not long after, she met a woman named Marsha while working in retail, who introduced her to her son, Brandon, the man who would soon become Missy's husband. The two hit it off instantly, and less than a year later, they married in June 1998, before settling down in Red Oak, a peaceful town just outside of Dallas. Missy left her job in education to raise their three daughters. She was a devoted mother, but she was also driven. As her children grew older, Missy turned her focus toward health and fitness, determined to inspire other women who struggled to balance family life and self-care. She trained relentlessly, became a certified fitness instructor, and eventually joined Camp Gladiator, a popular outdoor fitness program. Her dedication, optimism, and passion for helping others quickly made her a beloved figure in the community. By 2016, Missy had found her calling, coaching early morning fitness boot camps and encouraging others to become the best version of themselves. Although it had been raining through the nights, Missy still posted on Facebook, "Class was on." Up at 3:30 a.m. at Creekside Church of Christ by 4:30 a.m, early birds welcome. Brandon, her husband, was out of town on a fishing trip in Biloxi. His mum had planned to stay with the girls, but storms kept her home. Missy figured the kids would sleep right through the boot camp. She'd be back to get them ready for school. She'd done this many times before. But at 4:15 a.m, Missy pulled into the church lot. She started unloading spare mats, light dumbbells, the folding table for sign-ins. She set her keys on the tailgate, carried a load inside, and like always, went to switch on the lights for the bathrooms and water. At 4:18 a.m, she stepped into the corridor, heard something down the main hall, and went to check. This would be the last moment of Missy Bevers' life. Around 4:35 a.m, a new early bird camper arrived, spotted Missy's truck and her keys still on the tailgate. The door seemed locked. He didn't know the trick of the interior latch, He called Missy. No answer. He waited. By 5 a.m, a couple pulled in to join him. They knew the door mechanism. They stepped inside, calling Missy's name. Glass crunched underfoot. Drawers open. Window panels smashed. A hallway that suddenly felt wrong. Within minutes, one of them found Missy on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass, with catastrophic injuries to her head and chest. 2 911 calls, then a call to Brandon. There's been an accident. Then the truth no one was ready to hear. Sirens, tape, floodlights, and a town that woke to the unthinkable. By sunrise, investigators had their first lead. Cameras inside and outside the church. Not all of them worked, but one did. What it showed was unsettling. At 3:50 a.m, nearly half an hour before Missy arrived, an unknown figure forced entry through the kitchen. They were dressed in full police-style tactical gear. Gloves, helmet, face mask. Police across the back. In their hands, a hammer and a pry bar. They didn't sprint. They strolled, slow, almost casual, down the corridors, tapping and breaking glass panels on the interior doors, opening offices, rifling files. Sometimes they steadied themselves with a hand on the wall. Their gait was distinct, feet angled outward, what many call a duck walk. Height estimate, roughly 5'2" to 5'8". Broad in the gear, but the bulk could be deceptive. Nothing obvious was stolen. The worst damage? The church office and filing cabinets, as if someone was looking for something specific. So this wasn't a smash and grab. It looked like staging or hunting. And if the intruder came in at 3:50, then Missy walked right into the same building 28 minutes later. Police stayed tight-lipped about the exact cause of death, holding back details only the killer would know. They did say Missy suffered puncture injuries to the head and chest. Over time, reporting and context would suggest 2 likely sources: blows from the hammer and a firearm. One gut punch detail: investigators believe Missy was inside the church less than 4 minutes before she was attacked. Her Fitbit likely told them when her heart stopped. 4 minutes. That's how fast this unfolded. Detectives start where they have to, close to home. Brandon, Missy's husband, was in Mississippi with a documented alibi. They also looked at Randy, Brandon's father, after people online noticed a similar stance and gait to the person on the tape. A dry cleaner reported Randy had dropped off a blood-stained shirt, until tests confirmed it was dog blood from a tragic fight between family pets the day after Missy's death. Randy was in California. His phone pings backed it up. Both men were publicly cleared. But the questions didn't stop. Missy and Brandon had some marital strain. Poor finances, at least one prior affair, counselling, a recommitment 10 months earlier. On LinkedIn, police found messages with another man that felt familiar. Was this personal? Was someone angry? A spouse? A stalker? A man Missy had described as creepy? Leads were explored. No charges, no suspect. Then, another camera, another puzzle. SWFA outdoors. A gun store, about a mile from the church, captured a dark Nissan Altima prowling its lot for 6 minutes in the early hours. Lights off, then on, then off again. The timing? Just before the church break-in. The plate was unreadable in the rain. The driver never came forward. Coincidence? Or was the store the original target? Abandoned after seeing cars or cameras, and the church became Plan B. Tips poured in. One name echoed: Bobby Wayne Henry, a former officer, funeral security, known limp, riot gear in his past, a car similar to a vehicle of interest. A forensic podiatrist reviewed the gait. Results were inconclusive. His height, over 6 feet. It didn't match the church's figure's estimated range. He was cleared. Then the internet turned to the possibility of a woman. Some mannerisms in the footage look stereotypically feminine. At certain angles, the figure seems almost female. Experts cautioned, camera angle plus bulky gear can distort shape. A tech-assisted body dimension analysis, Green Man visualizations, suggests the person is likely slimmer than they appear under the kit. Even a prosthetic leg has been theorized by independent analysts, potentially explaining the gait, though resolution makes it impossible to confirm. And always the same problem. No face, no plate, no name. There are two main theories. One, a targeted attack. Missy's public Facebook post gave exact time and place. If someone fixated on her, LinkedIn creep, jealous partner, jealous spouse, they'd have known when to find her alone. The police gear hides identity, creates authority, and masks DNA. Nothing was stolen. The wounds to her chest felt personal. If this was targeted, the intruder's slow patrol might be staging a fake burglary. Break glass, rifle files, then wait in a blind spot. But then, why the casual wandering? Why not check windows, watch for Missy, or ambush the door? Why risk other campers arriving minutes later? If they followed her life enough to know Brandon was out of town, why not strike at home, on a dark street, in a car stop? If it was planned, some of the behaviour feels strangely unplanned. Or, 2, burglary gone wrong. The figure spends time in offices and files, exactly where a burglar might expect to find Sunday offerings, waiting for the Monday deposit. Creekside publicly shared they averaged $10,000 weekly. It's Monday, 3:50 a.m. Most churches are closed. A burglar wouldn't expect a 5 a.m. fitness boot camp. They move slowly because why hurry? They smash interior glass to access locks. They could have lifted the mask in a safe room. Missy walks in. She sees a face. A panic struggle becomes murder. Hammer, possibly a gun. The controlled strolling? Not nerves, just confidence that no one would be there. And that car at the gun store. If the original plan was to rob SWFA, 2 parked vehicles might have spooked them into choosing the quieter target down the road. Both theories explain pieces. Neither explains everything. And that's the problem. So where is the investigation today? Police collected DNA, but not enough for a full profile. It could be usable in future genetic genealogy if a relative uploads to a public database or if the killer's DNA enters CODIS. The reward has grown to over $100,000. The ask is the same. Who was in that Nissan Altima? Who walks with that outward angled gait? Who owns tactical or paintball gear or a police costume and had reason to be out before 4 a.m. on a rainy Monday? There are still many questions to be answered. Missy Bevers was a force for good. A mum, a mentor, a motivator, who woke up in the dark to help people change their lives. She built a community that laughed together, sweat together, and believed in each other. The community and her family have lived with the whole ever since. Maybe one day this case will be solved and justice will finally be achieved for Missy.
There are 102 separate wounds on the body, which are believed to have been caused by a knife. This was a violent, frenzied attack on a vulnerable young man. It also asks people who live in the vicinity of Castle Park to check their gardens to see if any knife has been disregarded there. If anyone has any information, then I urge them to contact the police.
Colchester, UK. Roman walls, busy high streets, students and families. Open green parks where people cut through at night. Among the 150,000 residents is James, Jim, Atfield, 33, a father of 5. 4 years earlier, he suffered a tragic accident when a car hit him. He spent 8 weeks in a coma. He woke with a brain injury, mobility issues, memory loss. He didn't even remember his own children. But by 2014, he was fighting back. Semi-supported housing, karaoke nights, small victories, and an emotional reunion with his kids planned with his ex, Cheryl, just days away. He'll never make that reunion. Friday, 28th of March, 2014. Jim has a few drinks at the River Lodge pub. CCTV shows him at the bar. Alone. Relaxed. He leaves before 1 a.m, taking the familiar cut through Castle Park. A passerby finds him lying on the grass. "You alright, mate?" Jim slurs that he's fine, just sobering up. Cigarette in hand, the man calls back, "Be careful, yeah?" and wanders off. At 5:45 a.m, a resident stumbles on a horror scene. Jim is covered in blood, barely alive. Paramedics fight for 45 minutes. He's pronounced dead on arrival. An officer later says, at first he couldn't even tell Jim's hair or skin colour. There was only red.
There are 102 separate wounds on the body, which are believed to have been caused by a knife. This was a violent, frenzied attack on a vulnerable young man. It also asked people who live in the vicinity of Castle Park to check their gardens to see if any knife has been disregarded there. If anyone has any information, then I urge them to contact the police.
The autopsy revealed 102 stab wounds. His head, his hands and arms are shredded with defensive injuries. There's a bloody shoe print a metre away and more prints leading out of the park. The window of attack sits between 1 a.m. and 5:45 a.m. in a pitch-black park ringed by trees, a hunter's playground. Police pull CCTV. Nothing obvious. No one tailing Jim. No bar argument. No motive. No suspect. They release stills from the camera near a park entrance. 23 people seen passing between late evening and 4:20 a.m. and beg them all to come forward. The city goes on edge. Who butchers a stranger like this, and why? 3 months later, Colchester will get an answer it doesn't want. Tuesday, 17th of June, 2014, 10:30 a.m. Nahid Al-Manaya, 31, from Saudi Arabia, is a PhD student at the University of Essex, studying English. Due to graduate in August, she often walks the Salary Brook Trail, a tree-lined shortcut many students use. Her brother usually walks with her, but on Tuesdays he starts earlier. Today, she was alone. At 10:40 a.m, 2 locals searching for a missing cat find her on the path.
At 10:40 a.m, we received calls from members of the public to say that Nahid's body had been discovered very close to where we are now, here on the Salary Brook Trail. I'd ask anybody who was in the area of Hunswick Road at 10:20 a.m. or thereabouts to come forward and speak to us. We know from the CCTV footage there that there were people in that area in that time, and they are yet to come forwards to us.
The attack is savage. 16 stab wounds, major blows to the head. Like Jim, stab wounds to her eyes. She's small, barely 5 foot tall, overpowered in seconds. There's no theft, no sexual assault, no defensive path to safety, just brutality in the open, in daylight. Police lock down the area. The scenes echo Castle Park. Frenzied stabbing, eyes targeted, open public space, no weapon, minimal trace. They won't yet say the words linked. But the parallels are undeniable. This time, there are witnesses. Around 10:56 a.m, people see a young man running from the area. The description follows. White male, late teens to mid-20s, dark mop-like hair, average build, a long-sleeved top with hood, dark trousers. A composite picture goes out. Police canvass estates, knock on nearly 300 doors, drafting officers from 6 forces. Crime Stoppers post a £20,000 reward. Fear spikes. Personal alarms are handed out by the thousand. The university mourns. The community whispers the words, serial killer. For months, the case grinds. 900 plus interviews, searches of the rivers and ravines. But the scenes are frustratingly clean, as if the attacker wore gloves, planned exits, and worked in blind spots. The randomness terrifies people. The method hints at practice. Some in the community point to hate crime. Naheed wore traditional Islamic clothing. Others insist it's opportunistic. Wrong place, wrong time, same offender. Police stay open-minded, but run the cases as parallel tracks, because if they're linked, Colchester has a repeat killer. Tuesday, the 26th of May, 2015, 10:30 a.m, nearly a year since Naheed's murder, a dog walker, Michelle, crosses a small footbridge on the Salisbury Brook Trail, the exact route where Naheed died. A teenage boy stands alone, scanning, hands gloved, despite the heat. He locks eyes with her. He doesn't smile. He watches. Michelle turns back. She finds another woman on the trail. They return together. He's no longer on the bridge. He's crouched under a tree, peering. Something in her gut screams danger. She calls 999. I could be wrong, but his jacket looks like the one from the paper. And this is the same trail. PC Loomis arrives within minutes. The boy says he's out walking to clear his head. The officer notes the gloves, the thick jacket, asks if he has anything he shouldn't. The boy says yes. He has a large flip knife. They arrest him. His name? James Fairweather. 2 weeks after Naheed's killing, police had interviewed this boy and moved on. Now, he's about to talk, and what he says is shocking.
Some of the voices were talking to me. You need to make a sacrifice, or we're going to come and get you. You need to do it. And I saw him. It was laying on the grass, like that. It was like that, just fast asleep, where he was drunk. Then he goes, "He's the one. He's the one. Do it." So I went up to him. Can I stand up?
Yes.
Went up to him. Stood over like that. Not helping that. So I stabbed him first there. And I've done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing and louder and louder.
In interview, James is flat, calm. He says he hears voices. He says the devil sent him out to make a sacrifice. He describes sneaking out of a window on 28th of March 2014 with a large knife and gloves, walking a mile to Castle Park and finding Jim asleep on the grass. He stands over him. He's the one. Do it. Do it. He stabs down into the torso again and again. He hears gurgling, runs, washes the blade, bags the clothes, and leaves them for collection. He tells him about Naheed. He turns her around on the path. He says she'd have been safe if she wasn't alone, knowing a killer was out there. On his phone, police find an obsession with serial killers. He's read cases of offenders who claim diminished responsibility. He's been researching outcomes. He talks about the time between the murders, violent fantasies, hardcore pornography, video games, daily urges to kill again. He says he only paused because the police presence was heavy, not because he wanted to stop. He says he feels a bit sad, but the victims committed sins, and what he did was right. He wanted to go on. He says if not caught, he'd have taken 15 more lives. Because of his age, James is initially anonymous, housed in a secure hospital for assessments. His team pushes diminished responsibility, psychosis, autism, isolation, paranoia. 4 psychiatrists agree he's on the autistic spectrum, but prosecution experts find no convincing evidence of psychosis. One psychiatrist calls the voices inconsistent and cinematic, sometimes inside, sometimes outside, details changing. The interview tapes show clear memory, planning and control. Gloves, dumped clothing, weapon handling, targeting eyes, returning to hunt in the same place. The judge is firm. Autism is not violence. Many people have it. It is not a pathway to sadism. The murders were sadistic and horrific. The eye targeting a signature. The jury returns unanimous guilty on 2 counts of murder in April 2016. He's then named to the public. He's sentenced to 2 life terms with a minimum of 27 years. If ever released, he'll be on licence for life. His mother weeps. Jim's mother says they can never forgive.
On March 29th, 2014, our lives were changed forever when my kind and brave son Jim was brutally killed. He had been through so much already, having fought hard to overcome the effects of brain damage suffered when he was struck by a car. He didn't deserve to die.
The community thanks Michelle, the dog walker whose instinct likely saved the next victim, possibly herself. Colchester would never be quite the same again. 2 lives, a father rebuilding after tragedy, and a young student chasing her future, ending in senseless brutality that stunned the community. James Atfield has survived the unthinkable once before, only to be taken when he was finally finding his way back. Nahid Al-Manaya had crossed an ocean to learn, a promise extinguished on a quiet path in broad daylight. For the officers who worked the case, those images would never fade. The park, the trail, the patterns of violence that spoke of control rather than chaos. Fairweather's crimes were committed by a boy barely old enough to leave school, yet marked by the deliberate precision of someone far older. It was a chilling glimpse into what could have become a long and devastating series of killings, one that ended only because a stranger trusted her instinct to speak up. Today, the story of Colchester's double murders stands as a haunting reminder that darkness can hide behind the most ordinary faces, and that sometimes what saves lives is not strength or strategy, but a single moment of awareness and the courage to act on it. On the morning of September the 14th, 2007, a 14-year-old boy stepped into London's busiest station, walked towards the exit and vanished. No phone, no backpack, no coat, no plan anyone could ever uncover. The CCTV shows him walking calmly into the sunlight, and then nothing. For nearly 2 decades, investigators, experts, and his devastated family have searched for answers. But the question remains, what happened to Andrew Gosden? Andrew Paul Gosden was born in 1993 in Bolby, Doncaster, a quiet suburb where life moved at a steady, predictable pace. His parents, Kevin and Glenys, were speech therapists, thoughtful, gentle, not the type to impose beliefs or strictness. Andrew and his older sister Charlotte grew up in a home filled with books, debate and music, especially metal and emo, which Andrew adored. He was introverted, brilliant and quirky, not streetwise, not adventurous, and absolutely not the type to wander off without telling anyone. Small for his age, with strong prescription glasses and a distinctive double ridge in his right ear, Andrew looked more like a 12-year-old than a teenager. He had no history of arguments at home, no bullying at school, no mental health concerns, nothing that signalled what would come next. Academically, he stood out over everyone else. Top of his class, part of the young, gifted and talented programme, and on track for straight A stars and later at Cambridge University. Not one teacher, friend or family member could point to a single warning sign, but in the weeks before he disappeared, subtle changes began to appear. Twice he walked the long 4-mile journey home instead of taking the bus, something completely out of character. He'd also been reading Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, heavy philosophical material about identity, morality and freedom. It wasn't alarming at the time, but it becomes haunting in hindsight. On September the 13th, 2007, dinner was normal. TV was normal. Andrew helped with the washing up, worked on a puzzle with his dad, then watched comedy shows with his mum. Nothing was unusual. Not a single hint of conflict, stress or distress. The last night of Andrew's life, as anyone knew it, was painfully ordinary. The next day, Andrew woke up later than usual, irritated, snappy, but nothing dramatic. At 8 a.m, he walked out the front door like every other school day, saying, "See you later." A neighbour saw him head towards the usual bus stop, but instead of catching the bus, he turned away. At 8:30 a.m, Andrew returns home. Inside, he took off his school uniform, placed almost everything neatly into the wash, even hanging up his blazer, and changed into a black Slipknot t-shirt, black jeans, black trainers, and his watch. He packed lightly, a satchel with his wallet, keys and PSP, but no charger, no coat, no food. He left behind his passport, £100 birthday money, warm clothes, everything you need to take to disappear. This was not the packing of a boy running away forever. At 9:05 a.m, he leaves again. The neighbour's CCTV captured him walking calmly down Littlemore Lane. This is the moment everything becomes real. At 9:17 a.m, at Doncaster train station, Andrew bought a one-way ticket to London King's Cross for £31.40. The ticket seller remembered offering a return for just £1 more. He refused, politely but firmly. She said he didn't seem scared, just sure. That morning, his school called home to report his absence, but dialed the wrong number. Their voicemail was never heard. A critical mistake that would later cost hours. At 9:35 a.m, Andrew boarded a delayed service to London. A woman sitting beside him said he was quiet, playing his PSP, ignoring announcements. Nothing odd, nothing frightened, just a calm 14-year-old boy heading to a city alone. By 11:25 a.m, at London's King's Cross station, Andrew was caught on CCTV walking out of the station into the bright lights of Euston Road. Small, dressed in black, blending into the rush of commuters. It was from here he vanished. Back home that evening, his family assumed Andrew was gaming in the cellar or working in his room. But when they checked, he wasn't there. They searched the house, his uniform in the wash, his passport untouched, and the PSP charger still plugged in. Panic set in. By 7 p.m, Andrew was officially reported missing. Police initially treated it as a runaway. Leaflets were printed within hours. Searches began across Doncaster, but little did they know, Andrew was already 170 miles away. It was not until September the 17th when the Doncaster ticket seller saw Andrew's missing poster and contacted the police. Only then did investigators realise he had travelled to London. So British Transport Police were not notified for 3 full days, a delay that caused devastating ripple effects. When CCTV was finally reviewed, King's Cross footage had to be sifted manually, pixel by pixel, until Andrew was eventually spotted. It took 3 weeks. His family went to London to search and hand out flyers in a desperate attempt to find him. A woman reported serving Andrew at a Pizza Hut on Oxford Street around 12:30 p.m, fully consistent with his movements and personality. Police were never able to pull the CCTV. It was overwritten. A media campaign was launched.
Andrew Gosden is an intelligent 14-year-old and he disappeared 2 weeks ago. He hasn't been seen since. Every day his mother is out searching for him, putting up posters and hoping for sightings. He's one of 30,000 people who are reported missing in London every year, as Tom Edwards reports.
Could you have seen this boy in this area? Do you come here regularly? Is it possible you've seen this boy? Could you possibly have seen this boy at all in this vicinity?
In the crowds around South Kensington, a mother is looking for her son. She's been searching for 10 days.
It really has been quite devastating because it's such a shock, and we just haven't got a blueprint for how to handle this kind of situation, really. Sometimes putting in 15-hour days, just walking, chatting to general public, staff in the museums or any places where I know he's likely to have been that he enjoys coming to.
Andrew Gosden is from Doncaster and 14 years old. He loves museums and visited the capital regularly. A gifted student, he withdrew £200 from his savings account and was last seen on CCTV boarding a train to the capital.
Unconfirmed sightings followed. Southwark Park, a boy sleeping rough, but the witness remained unnamed and nothing was followed up. Mortlake Station, a boy matching his description was getting off a train, but with different clothes. Again, no follow-up. Covent Garden, on the 17th of October 2007, a strange interaction between a female worker with a boy who looked like Andrew standing outside of an office block. She remarked that he looked like the missing boy from TV. The boy denied it was him and seemed evasive. He left shortly after. Hostels, museums, streets, all too late for CCTV recovery. In 2007, most footage was kept only 14 to 28 days. By the time police looked, London had already erased the clues. As police grew frustrated, suspicion shifted inward onto the family. The Gosdens were subject to brutal interviews. Kevin was confronted with, "We know what happened. Tell us why." Theories included accidental killing at home, staged disappearance, covered-up abuse. All baseless, all disproven, but psychologically devastating. Kevin spiralled. In December 2007, broken by guilt, grief and pressure, he attempted suicide. He survived, but only after emergency intervention and months of psychiatric care. The moment devastated the family and permanently changed the investigation's trajectory. In November 2008, an anonymous letter sent to the BBC claimed that a boy who looked like Andrew had been seen sleeping rough near a churchyard in Leominster in Herefordshire. Again, another lead that went nowhere. Then, strangely, a man visited Leominster Police Station and spoke via their intercom, saying he had knowledge on Andrew Gosden, but he left before an officer could get down to speak to him. This happened before the letter was sent. It's unclear whether they were connected, whether this was genuine, or just someone seeking attention. Between 2008 and 2020, Sony confirmed Andrew's PSP had never connected to the internet. No bank activity was ever recorded again. No passport usage, no benefits claims, NHS records, or employment hits. Hundreds of sightings led nowhere. A sonar search of the Thames found nothing connected to him. Experts began connecting Andrew's case to the disappearance of a 16-year-old London student called Alex Slowly, another brilliant maths student who vanished into London's transport network. But nothing linked them definitively. In December 2021, 2 men were arrested in London on suspicion of kidnap, human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, and indecent images. Devices were seized. Forensic work began. For a moment, hope and dread returned. But by September 2023, both men were released without charge. Police now say that they weren't involved. Once again, the case returned to silence. So what are the theories of this case? 1. Planned runaway. Andrew bought a one-way ticket. He walked alone. He stayed calm. But he packed nothing. No coat, no charger, no food. He left £100 at home. He did not pack like someone disappearing forever. 2. A day trip gone wrong. This scenario has strong support. He loved London, loved museums, loved Pizza Hut, loved exploring ideas. His family think he may have intended to spend only a few hours there, maybe stay with relatives if necessary, maybe rebel quietly, no phone, no rules, just a day of freedom. But something derailed that plan. Whether by misadventure, exhaustion, or a wrong encounter, a simple day out may have turned catastrophic. 3. Grooming or a pre-arranged meeting. Police explored this deeply. Every digital record was checked. There is zero evidence he communicated with anyone beforehand. And King's Cross, the most CCTV covered location in the UK, would be the worst place possible to abduct a child unnoticed. This theory weakens the more you examine it. 4. Suicide. His body would likely have been found. He showed no signs of depression, and he withdrew all his savings. This theory has very little support. 5. Foul play after arriving in London. This is sadly plausible. If Andrew tried to sleep rough, as several sightings suggested, he would have been extremely vulnerable. If he met the wrong people offering drugs, shelter, or company, he could have been harmed, overdosed, or died accidentally. A panicked group of teenagers or adults could have hidden the body. Someone may have tried to confess later. The man who approached Leominster Station, but lost courage. And because police delays meant CCTV was wrong, the opportunity to ever prove this may be lost forever. The most grounded theory sits somewhere in the middle. Previously, Andrew went to Cambridge for an open event for future students. It's possible he could have met somebody there, somebody older, somebody who he immediately felt close to. There was an exhibition in London for Tutankhamun. Supposedly he had come back from the open day quite excited. He may have gone with the hope of meeting someone. However, this was investigated and nothing came from it. But there may be some plausibility to the theory. Andrew may also have been struggling quietly. Not in crisis, not desperate, but simply feeling disconnected, misunderstood, or overwhelmed in ways teenagers often are. His Slipknot shirt, his emo interests, his heavy reading, they point to a boy searching for identity, independence, meaning. He may have planned a small act of rebellion, a day in London alone, maybe intending to return that evening, maybe knowing he had family in London as a safety net, but without a phone, without street awareness, without a plan. A single wrong encounter could have changed everything. And in the chaos that followed, the police delays, overwritten CCTV, misplaced sightings, and poor coordination, any chance of tracing his steps evaporated. This tragedy may be a mixture of a boy seeking space, police missteps, coincidence, and an encounter in London that went catastrophically wrong. Not a planned suicide, not a groomed abduction, not a runaway intending never to return, but something far more human and far more heartbreaking. The Gosden family still live in the same house. The locks have never been changed. Andrew still has a key. His mother still plants his favourite wildflowers in the garden. His father still campaigns for missing children. His sister still carries the weight of survivor's guilt. They all wait for the same thing, an answer. Andrew walked out of King's Cross Station at 11:25 a.m. After that, not one confirmed trace. Until someone speaks up, until a witness remembers, until the truth finally surfaces, we can only keep asking the question, what happened to Andrew Gosden? This is the last time Elisa Lam was seen alive. Inside a hotel elevator in Los Angeles. Her movements are erratic. She presses every button, steps in and out, and appears to be hiding from someone we never see. Hours later, she would vanish, and what police found days after this footage would shock the world. Elisa Lam was not just a mystery to people who knew her. She was bright, thoughtful, imaginative, a university student with a deep love of writing, fashion, film, and culture. She documented her inner world obsessively, honestly, and sometimes painfully. And long before Los Angeles, long before the Cecil Hotel, she had been very open about her struggles with mental health. Born in April 1991 in Vancouver, British Columbia, Elisa was the daughter of David and Elisa Lam, immigrants from Hong Kong who ran a family restaurant. By all accounts, she was intelligent, creative and introspective, someone who lived largely inside her own thoughts. She studied at the University of British Columbia and kept multiple online blogs where she wrote about identity, emotion and her place in the world. But alongside that creativity was something darker. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. She wrote openly about paranoia, emotional crashes, and her fear that her academic record would expose just how much she was struggling. At times she would disappear from classes. At others she'd throw herself into writing and self-analysis. These weren't secrets, they were warnings, written in plain sight. In late 2012, Elisa began planning a solo trip down the US West Coast. She framed it as a break, a reset, possibly even a step towards transfer in schools. But in her Tumblr posts, the tone begins to change. She mentions losing her phone, creating new social media accounts due to paranoia, feeling low, feeling disconnected. On January the 24th, 2013, she wrote something that would later feel chilling in hindsight. Every now and then, I do something entirely impulsive and reckless. 4 days later, Elisa arrived in Los Angeles. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, a budget hotel on the edge of Skid Row. It was not the kind of place you stayed for comfort or peace. The area was loud, chaotic, unpredictable. For someone already vulnerable, it was a pressure cooker. Within days, Elisa's behaviour began to worry other guests. Her roommates complained that she was acting strangely, hiding notes, locking doors, behaving erratically. Hotel staff moved her into a private room on the 5th floor. On January the 31st, the last day of her planned stay in LA, Elisa was seen behaving normally. A bookstore clerk described her as friendly, outgoing, laughing and chatty. She talked about books, about travelling light, about moving on to Santa Cruz. That night, she vanished. Her parents expected a phone call. They didn't get one. By the time they flew to Los Angeles, panic had already set in. Police searched the hotel. Dogs failed to pick up her scent. Her room showed no sign of struggle. No clues. Nothing missing that explained where she'd gone. Then, on February the 14th, LAPD released the elevator footage. The clip went viral instantly. Elisa steps into an elevator. She presses multiple buttons. She waits. The doors don't close. She leans out, looks left, looks right, steps back in, hides in the corner, makes strange hand movements, appears to speak to someone who isn't there. It's unsettling, disturbing. But what it shows, more than anything else, is confusion. 5 days later, the search ended.
Police confirmed the identity of a female's body found in the water tank of an LA hotel. 21-year-old Elisa Lam disappeared several weeks ago. The Canadian tourist had been staying at the Cecil Hotel. Hotel guests reported the water pressure in the building was low. A maintenance worker checked the water tanks on the roof and found the body. LA authorities say the body had been inside for at least 2 weeks and was severely decomposed. According to the LAPD, the tank's metal latch could be easily opened, but added that access to the hotel's roof is secured with an alarm and lock. Authorities released security video last week showing Lam acting strangely in the hotel. They characterized her disappearance as suspicious. Lam had stayed at the Cecil Hotel during a visit to LA that began January 26th and was last seen on January 31st.
After guests complained of low water pressure and a strange taste coming from the taps, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof. He opened a water tank. Elisa Lam's body was floating inside. She was naked. Her clothes were in the tank with her. Her keys and watch were nearby. There were no signs of assault, no defensive injuries, no drugs or alcohol in her system. The coroner ruled her death as an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a contributing factor. And that should have been the end. Instead, it became one of the most dissected deaths of the modern internet. The Cecil Hotel's history didn't help. Serial killers, suicides, violent crime. The building itself felt cursed, and people wanted a darker answer. Paranormal theories exploded. Murder theories followed. Elevator games, cover-ups, cult activity. But when you strip away the noise, the evidence refuses to cooperate. No injuries, no witnesses, no missing items, no unknown DNA, no proof anyone followed her, no CCTV of anyone else near her at the critical time, and crucially, access to the roof was possible without alarms being triggered. The most uncomfortable explanation is also the most consistent. Elisa had stopped taking some of her prescribed medication. Toxicology reports showed antidepressants in her system, but her antipsychotic medication was absent. One of the drugs she was taking is known to trigger manic episodes in people with bipolar disorder. Mania can involve paranoia, disorientation, hallucinations, impulsivity, agitation, and disrobing. And tragically, water attraction during manic episodes is not unheard of. Elisa didn't need to be chased, or attacked, or coerced. She only needed to be unwell, alone, and in the wrong place at the wrong time. That doesn't make her death less tragic. It makes it harder to accept, because there is no villain, no conspiracy, no justice to be served. Just a young woman whose illness overtook her in a city that didn't notice. The elevator footage doesn't show terror, it shows a mind unravelling. And perhaps the real tragedy of Elisa Lam's story isn't that people still ask what happened, but that so many refuse to accept the answer when it's quiet, mundane, and devastatingly human. He ran into this Bronx convenience store, terrified and begging for help. Lesandro Junior Guzman Feliz was just 15 years old when a group of gang members chased him inside, mistaking him for someone else. Staff tried to keep him inside, but within seconds he was dragged back onto the street. What followed shocked New York and the entire world. That night, Junior lost his life, and the city demanded justice. Lesandro Junior Guzman Feliz lived with his mother in a small apartment in the Bronx, New York City. He wasn't involved in gangs. He wasn't out causing trouble. He was just a normal teenager, shy, polite, and deeply loved. His friends described him as gentle, kind, the type of kid who'd walk away from a fight. He volunteered with the NYPD Explorers Youth Program. He wanted to wear a badge one day, not for power, but to help people. And that makes what happened next even harder to accept. June 20th, 2018. That evening, Junior was at home, gaming, while his mother slept in the next room. At 10:05 p.m, a friend messaged him, asking if he wanted to come round and listen to music. Bored, Junior agreed, and security cameras soon captured him leaving his apartment and walking through the neighbourhood. He spent the next hour and a half hanging out, laughing, talking, just being a teenager. At 11:30 he headed home, but instead of stopping at his door, he continued past his building, toward an area known locally as Adams Place, a spot tied to gang activity. Junior wasn't a gang member, but a close friend lived nearby, and he planned to stop by. Moments later, his friend texted back, "Don't come here, it's not safe." Junior turned round immediately. But at that exact moment, several cars loaded with gang members drove onto the same street. They slowed, saw him, and began shouting. Junior panicked and ran. The cars cut him off ahead, forcing him toward a small corner bodega, just steps from his front door. Inside, he begged the shopkeeper to hide behind the counter. Seconds later, the gang burst inside, armed with knives and machetes. demanding the clerk hand Junior over. The shopkeeper hesitated, but fear and violence took over. One attacker lunged forward, grabbed Junior, and dragged him into the street. What followed was swift, frenzied, and merciless. Junior was stabbed, slashed, over and over. And then they fled, leaving a bleeding 15-year-old boy fighting for his life. Junior stumbled back into the store, crying for help, but people were terrified. Some froze, some filmed. With the last strength he had, he ran towards St. Barnabas Hospital. He collapsed at the entrance. Moments later, he died.
Hi there, guys. We are in the area where Junior was killed, and I want to show you right now. That is the block where that bodega is, where this all happened. You can see it's still blocked off tonight. That wake that you guys just talked about, it is still going on this hour. It should be wrapping up very soon. And, you know, to give you an idea, this is the hospital where he walked to or tried to get help, and you can see candles here right now and people outside. This is where he collapsed and died.
News spread within hours. The footage circulated across social media, the CCTV, the chase, the attack. The city was horrified. This wasn't just another crime story. This was a child, a boy who looked innocent, because he was. Vigils filled the streets. Hundreds marched with candles. Murals were painted across the Bronx. People asked, how could this happen? Why didn't anyone help? Why did gang violence get this far? Junior's mother appeared outside the courthouse, heartbroken but determined. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. Police soon confirmed the attackers were members of the Trinitarios, a Dominican prison-born street gang known for their violent turf feuds. But days later, something unexpected happened. A gang leader posted online claiming the stabbing was a mistaken identity attack. The boy they were looking for supposedly resembled Junior. Wrong place, wrong time. A mistake that cost an innocent child his life. The apology meant nothing, because there is no mistake that justifies what they did. Detectives pulled CCTV from dozens of locations. They tracked the vehicles, identified the suspects, and one by one, arrests began. Court documents describe the attack as coordinated, organised, deliberate. Junior's family attended every hearing, every testimony, every verdict. They relived those moments again and again, because they refused to let their son become just another statistic. In 2019, several members of the gang were convicted of murder. More trials followed. More sentences were handed down. Many received life in prison. But for Junior's mother, there would never be closure, because justice cannot bring her son back.
I won't gonna have him never ever again. You know, I feel like death in life.
Junior's death forced New York to confront something bigger. The rise in youth gang violence, the fear communities live in, the reality that innocent lives are caught in the middle. People began calling it the Bronx's wake-up call. Not for politics, not for headlines, but for the children who walk the streets every day, hoping to grow up. A foundation was created in Junior's name. Scholarships, youth programs, anti-gang campaigns. His dream of helping people didn't end. It simply changed shape. Murals, street tributes. His face became a symbol, not of violence, but of innocence lost. A reminder that every decision, every street, every moment can change a life forever. Junior was not a gangster, not a threat, not a target. He was a son, a friend, a boy who wanted to become a police officer and make the world safer. And yet, the world failed him. Today, the question isn't why this happened. It's how do we stop it happening again? Because behind every case like this, there's a mother, a family, and a future that never got the chance to exist. Before he was murdered, prison officer Lenny Scott made this 999 call.
We're going to have to get someone to look out to see if there's a car.
Okay, well, they're not going to sit directly outside it because it's a prisoner threatening my family.
Right, okay, so what's your name, please?
Lenny Scott.
And who's made the threat?
Elias Morgan.
What happened later was captured on camera. Lenny Scott was shot and killed in a car park. It was supposed to be an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of night where people finish work, head to the gym, exchange small talk in the car park, and go about their quiet routines that make up everyday life. On the evening of the 8th of February 2024, in the small Lancashire town of Skelmersdale, that routine ended in violence. For 33-year-old Lenny Scott, a former prison officer and father of 3, a trip to the gym would be his last. He didn't leave with sore muscles or a sense of achievement. He left on a stretcher, the victim of a calculated, cold-blooded execution. Lenny Scott was not a public figure. He wasn't famous. He wasn't controversial. He was, by all accounts, a decent man who took his job seriously. During his time as a prison officer at HMP Alt Course in Liverpool, Scott developed a reputation for professionalism and integrity. He wasn't the sort of officer who cut corners, accepted favours, or turned a blind eye when the rules were broken. And in a prison environment, that can make you unpopular. Inmates respected consistency, but they didn't always like it. And one inmate in particular would carry that resentment far beyond the prison walls. In March 2020, Scott was carrying out a routine cell search. The prisoner, named Elias Morgan, a man with a long criminal record, including theft, burglary, drug offences, conspiracy to rob, and causing serious injury by dangerous driving. Morgan was already serving time for drug offences. During the search, Scott found a mobile phone. Phones in prison aren't rare. They're smuggled in by drones, visitors, corrupt staff, and increasingly inventive methods. But this phone was different. It contained evidence. Specifically evidence of an illicit relationship between Morgan and a female prison officer, Sarah Williams. For Williams, exposure meant dismissal, disgrace, and prosecution. For Morgan, it meant humiliation and the collapse of the influence he had quietly built inside the prison. Morgan tried to make the problem disappear. He offered Scott £1,500 to keep quiet. To some people, that might have been tempting, but Scott refused. Accepting would have meant being compromised forever. Scott documented the discovery properly and passed the evidence on. That refusal wasn't just a no. To Morgan, it was an insult. Witnesses later described Morgan making threats. He told Scott he would bide his time. At one point, he even mimed firing a gun with his fingers, the sort of gesture that sounds ridiculous, until it isn't. Scott took the threat seriously. Before his death, Scott contacted the police.
We're going to have to get someone to look out to see if there's a car.
Okay, well, they're not going to sit directly outside it because it's a prisoner threatening my family.
Right, okay, so what's your name, please?
Lenny Scott.
And who's made the threat?
Elias Morgan. He's described my family and me to a T. Described my house. And he said he's had them there just ready for because it's over. I've nicked them for a phone.
Ah, right.
And
okay.
he's until I drop that, he said they're staying there and they're just going to constantly be around my house and.
Right. Okay.
Just in fear for my family's life. That's all.
He reported suspicious vehicles outside his home and named Elias Morgan directly. He expressed concern not just for himself but for his family. He knew Morgan held a grudge, but time passed. Morgan eventually left prison. Scott left the prison service, focusing on his family and trying to move on. What Scott didn't know was that Morgan wasn't moving on at all. CCTV later revealed that Morgan had been stalking Scott. He visited Scott's home, he watched his routines, he followed him to different gyms. He carried out dry runs, checking car parks, timing movements, rehearsing escape routes. He even visited Scott's old gym before settling on the one in Skelmersdale. This wasn't impulsive, it was methodical. That evening, Scott stood outside the gym chatting to a friend. Morgan was already there. He wore a high-visibility jacket, not for irony, but because it made him blend in. He questioned someone in a high-vis jacket in a car park. He hid behind a parked vehicle, waited, then stepped out. The attack lasted seconds. He fired 6 shots, striking Scott in the head and body. Scott collapsed. Morgan fled. Morgan escaped on an electric bike, riding across footpaths and fields before transferring to a van parked nearby. The van would later be traced to a company connected to Morgan's family. The town was left in shock. Skelmersdale isn't unfamiliar with crime, but this wasn't that. This was precise, personal, and terrifying. A public execution in a gym car park. The murder sent shockwaves through the community. Tributes flooded in. Friends described Scott as kind, loyal, and devoted to his children. Lancashire police launched a major investigation. They reviewed hours of CCTV, analysed phone data, tracked vehicle movements, and reconstructed Morgan's movements stretching back weeks. The picture was chilling. This wasn't rage. This was obsession. Police uncovered CCTV of Morgan conducting surveillance. The electric bike appearing on earlier dry runs. The van linked to his family. Scott's earlier police call naming Morgan. Testimony about the prison incident and threats. Morgan handed himself in on the 22nd of February 2024, 2 weeks after the murder. Not out of remorse, but because the net was closing. He pleaded not guilty. The trial at Preston Crown Court lasted 9 weeks. Jurors saw the CCTV. They heard about the bribe, the threats, the stalking. They listened to Scott's own recorded fears. The prosecution's argument was simple. Lenny Scott died because he refused a bribe. That was it. Morgan's defence attempted to cast doubt, but the evidence was overwhelming. On the 29th of August 2025, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Guilty of murder.
Accordingly, for this offence of murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life with a minimum term of 43 years and 278 days. You will pay the statutory charge in the appropriate amount, which will be entered on the court record. Take him down.
On the 2nd of September 2025, Morgan was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 45 years. In practical terms, he will almost certainly die in prison. The judge described it as a carefully planned revenge killing, an attack not just on Scott, but on the justice system itself. The prison officer at the centre of the original scandal, Sarah Williams, was later charged with multiple offences, including misconduct in a public office. In December 2024, she was sentenced to 18 months in prison after pleading guilty. Her actions didn't cause Scott's death, but they set the chain of events in motion. This case is disturbing because of its simplicity. No gangs, no chaos, no misunderstanding. Just one man who did his job properly, and another who could not accept being exposed. Lenny Scott paid with his life. If this case teaches us anything, it's this. Doing the right thing doesn't always come with protection, but cowardice and obsession always come with consequences.
The BBC television presenter Jill Dando has been murdered outside her London home.
On the morning of April the 26th, 1999, Britain's most recognisable TV presenter stepped outside her London home and never made it back inside. Jill Dando, the face of Crime Watch and one of the most trusted figures on British television, was shot dead on her doorstep. No robbery, no witnesses, no clear motive. The murder shocked the nation, triggered one of the largest investigations in UK history, and 2 decades later, it remains unsolved. Who killed Jill Dando? Jill Dando's death is so unsettling precisely because of how ordinary her final hours were. Nothing about that morning suggested danger. No frantic calls, no sense of being followed, no warning signs that anyone, least of all Jill herself, recognised. By 1999, Jill Dando was at the height of her career. She was 37 years old, one of the BBC's most trusted presenters, and weeks away from marrying Alan Farthing, a respected gynaecologist. Friends described her as happy, grounded, and excited about the future. She had recently moved into her home in Fulham, a quiet, leafy street, the sort of place where neighbours know each other, and nothing dramatic ever happens. Importantly, Jill did not live a reckless or chaotic life. She didn't party heavily. She didn't keep late hours. She wasn't secretive, and she did not believe that she was in danger. The night before she was killed, Jill stayed with Alan Farthing at his home. This matters because it immediately rules out some theories. She didn't spend the night alone. She didn't leave home unexpectedly. There was no argument, no drama, no sudden change of plan. The next morning, Jill left Alan's house and returned to her home in Fulham. That journey, from his house to hers, is where the timeline begins to tighten. Jill had just returned from a brief work-related trip the day before. Nothing exotic, nothing secretive. She had been filming Holiday, one of the BBC's most light-hearted programmes. This wasn't Crime Watch. This wasn't controversial. It was routine television work. That's why the idea of a sudden reactive hit, something triggered by that trip, has never sat comfortably with investigators. Late morning, Jill arrived back at her home in Gosden Avenue. She parked nearby, walked up the street, and unlocked her front gate. She was carrying keys. No bags, no phone to her ear, no sign of distress. At approximately 11:32 a.m, a single gunshot rang out. Neighbours later said it was so sudden and so sharp that many didn't even register it as a gunshot. A scream was heard. Jill collapsed just inside her gate. She died where she fell.
She was conscious, she was talking?
She wasn't conscious when I saw her.
And what did you do, dial 999 straight away?
I personally didn't, but the people I was with, the two ladies who also live in the street, dialed the number and had the ambulance services there within 10 minutes. Or
what did you do with Jill? Did you comfort her or?
No, obviously we were there, but without any sort of medical history between the three of us, the best thing was just to keep her sort of, unless she had woken up from her consciousness, and help her, but we left her there until the ambulance services came.
Was Alan Farthing a suspect? Very briefly, yes. As with all partners, he was ruled out early and thoroughly. Alan Farthing was at work at the time of the shooting. His movements were confirmed. There was no evidence of conflict, financial motive, or instability. Police were clear. He was never considered a viable suspect. In fact, investigators later described the relationship as stable, loving, and genuine. So what about the crime scene? This is where the case becomes deeply uncomfortable. Gosden Avenue is short. The front gardens are tiny. There is nowhere to hide for long periods. For the killer to be waiting, they would have needed to know Jill's exact time of arrival, remain unnoticed in daylight, act within seconds, and leave without being seen. That points either to extraordinary luck or prior knowledge. A man called Barry George lived nearby. He was in his late 30s, unemployed, socially isolated, and known to the police. He had no long-term relationships, no stable employment, no close social circle. He had a history of stalking women, obsessive behaviour, fixation on female celebrities. He had previously been arrested for harassing women and had attempted to approach public figures. This is why police began to look closely at him. When police searched George's flat, they found material that raised alarms. There were press cuttings of Jill Dando, photographs of female presenters, notes and obsessive writings about women he admired. To police, this suggested fixation. However, and this is crucial, there were no letters sent to Jill, no direct communication, and no proof she knew he existed. So did Jill know she was being stalked? This is one of the most important details. Jill never reported being followed. She never contacted police. She never told friends she felt unsafe. There were no threatening letters, No strange phone calls. No unexplained incidents. For someone supposedly being stalked to the point of murder, this absence is striking. Barry George was arrested and eventually charged. The prosecution built a psychological case. A lonely man, an obsession, proximity to the scene, a single particle of gunshot residue found in his coat. But no weapon, no witnesses, no forensic trail. On appeal, experts dismantled the residue evidence. One particle, found months later, could not reliably place George at the scene. The court ruled the conviction unsafe, and suddenly, the story collapsed.
After more than 8 years in prison, Barry George is a free man, cleared of the murder of TV presenter Jill Dando. He left from the back of the court, trying to escape the cameras. Mr. George's family have campaigned tirelessly for his release.
We're really delighted to finally have justice. I want to thank everybody who has supported us through all these years.
So why don't the theories sit comfortably? This is where instincts come in. If this was organised crime, why no claim? If this was intimidation, why no message? If this was a professional hit, why this street, this time, this risk? And if this was Barry George acting alone, how did he know she'd be there? How did he wait unseen? How did he leave unnoticed? Every explanation answers one question and creates three more. The uncomfortable truth. Someone knew Jill's routine that day. Someone knew she would return home alone. Someone knew there would be a narrow window and took it. And whoever pulled that trigger has never spoken. No confession, no deathbed admission, no claim of responsibility, just silence. Jill Dando helped solve crimes for a living. She stood with victims. She brought offenders into the light. And yet, her own case remains in shadow. A single shot, a quiet street, and a question that still refuses to go away. Who killed Jill Dando? This is Mitchell Quay. He spoke publicly after his partner Lindsay was reported missing. He claimed she had simply vanished, leaving him alone with the kids. But as days passed, investigators started noticing things that didn't add up. The story changed, the timeline tightened, and what began as a missing person appeal quickly turned into something far darker. This case is one of the most chilling examples of how appearances can be deceiving. What happened to Lindsay Quay? Lindsay Quay was described as a devoted mother, a caring partner, and someone who put her children above everything else. She was a hands-on mother, deeply involved in her children's lives. School runs, routines, birthdays, and day-to-day care. Friends and family described her as warm, dependable, and emotionally present. Importantly, Lindsay was consistent. She kept in regular contact with loved ones. She checked in. She showed up. This matters because when someone like Lindsay disappears, investigators don't ask where did she go. They ask why did she leave at all. And there was no evidence she intended to. No packed bags, no financial withdrawals, no messages explaining a sudden decision to walk away from her children. Yet that is exactly what Mitchell Quay claimed had happened. Mitchell told police that Lindsay had gone missing voluntarily. According to him, she had left the home and abandoned the family, leaving him alone with the children. At first, this was framed as a missing person investigation, but there was an immediate problem. People close to Lindsay didn't recognise the version of her being described. This was not someone who would simply vanish. Not without a word. Not without taking steps. Not without her children. And then Mitchell took his version of events to national television. Mitchell Quay appeared on the television programme This Morning, speaking directly to viewers. He appealed for information. He spoke about Lindsay as someone who had gone missing, and he positioned himself as a husband searching for answers. But to many watching, including investigators, something didn't sit right. His language, his emotional responses, his focus. Viewers later said that the interview felt off, not overtly suspicious, but uncomfortable.
You've got this big question mark over your head, and I know you've featured on local television and you've been interviewed there, and obviously the question has to be put, and I know what your answer's going to be, but did you kill her?
No, I just wish someone had listened to me.
This wasn't proof of anything, but it was enough to intensify scrutiny, and behind the scenes, police were already shifting their focus. In the days that followed, Mitchell did something deeply unsettling. He allowed television crews into the family home. Cameras filmed him over multiple days, playing with his children, sitting in the living room, and speaking openly about how much he missed his wife. To the outside world, it looked like grief. To Lindsay's family, it looked staged.
I just don't know what to say to her anymore. I don't know what to do.
They watched as Mitchell performed mourning, while knowing Lindsay would never have left her children behind. The more Mitchell spoke, the more suspicion grew. As days passed, officers began to re-examine the timeline. They looked closely at the last confirmed movements of Lindsay. They analysed statements. They checked digital records. And slowly, the missing person narrative began to unravel. Inconsistencies emerged. Details changed. The story no longer lined up with the evidence. What had initially been treated as a disappearance was now being investigated as something far more serious. Behind closed doors, detectives reached a critical conclusion. Lindsay hadn't left. Something had happened to her, and the person closest to her was now the centre of the inquiry. Mitchell Quay was arrested. The shift was dramatic, from public appeal to criminal investigation. Police questioned Mitchell for 36 hours. During that time, he said almost nothing. No emotional collapse, no explanation, just no comment. By the evening of June the 8th, investigators had had enough. Mitchell Quay was formally charged with Lindsay's murder. And then, just 1 hour later, everything changed. Mitchell broke down. He confessed to killing Lindsay. He admitted that after murdering her, he dismembered her body in the bathtub of their home, the same home where their children lived. He placed her body parts into bags, and then, with his children present, he drove to various locations and dumped her remains across multiple sites. Lindsay's body was scattered, her dignity stripped away. The following day, Mitchell agreed to take the police to the burial locations, but even then, his behaviour shocked officers. He asked if the press would be present. He wanted to be seen. As he led police to the sites, witnesses later described him as laughing, joking, and showing no visible signs of remorse, pointing out where he had left pieces of the woman who had been his wife and the mother of his children. Some of Lindsay's remains were never recovered. Mitchell had deliberately placed her head and hands into a refuse bin for collection, ensuring she would never be fully returned to her family. The investigation also revealed that Mitchell had help. His brother, Elliot Quay, assisted in the disposal of Lindsay's body. Elliot would later be sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role. In court, prosecutors laid out their case. They argued that Lindsay's death was not an accident, but it was deliberate, and that the aftermath had been carefully constructed to mislead investigators and the public. Juries heard about the inconsistencies in Mitchell's accounts, the evidence contradicting his claims, the attempt to portray Lindsay as someone who had simply walked away. Mitchell Quay was sentenced to life imprisonment. But for Lindsay's family, justice came with permanent loss. Lindsay never left her children. She never abandoned her home. And the story told to the public in those early days was a lie. What remains is the memory of a mother who tried to reclaim her life and paid for it. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one asking for sympathy. Lindsay Quay's story is not just about murder. It's about control, rejection, and the lies that can hide in plain sight. This is Jason Marshall arriving at Peter Fasoli's home. He's not rushing. He's not hiding his face. He's carrying a handgun in a holster, clearly visible, and what appears to be an ID card. He stands there calmly, making himself comfortable, as if he belongs there. Peter Fasoli had no idea that this man, who presented himself as trustworthy, was about to murder him. This wasn't a break-in, it was deception. So how did Jason Marshall gain Peter's trust? And what happened inside that house? Peter Fasoli was born into an Italian family in Manchester. He lived there most of his life, but in 2012 he moved to London. By January 2013, Peter was 58, living alone in a small bungalow in Northolt, West London. He worked from home, mainly as an IT consultant, the kind of job you can go a whole day speaking to nobody, and that meant his social interactions were limited. Peter was described as quiet, independent, by all accounts happy in his own way, living life how he wanted to live it. But he was also isolated. No close relatives nearby, not much community contact, not many people regularly checking in. And like a lot of people in that situation, he looked for companionship online. That's where Jason Marshall enters the story. Peter used online dating apps and sites to meet people. In early January 2013, he met a man calling himself Gabriel. Messages went back and forth. From the tone of the chat, Peter believed that this was leading to a sexual encounter, and not just that, it sounded like roleplay was part of it. The kind of roleplay where someone pretends to be an authority. And Gabriel leaned into that hard. The agreement was simple. Gabriel will come to Peter's bungalow at around 7 p.m. on the 6th of January. Peter thought he was inviting someone over for a consensual encounter. He had absolutely no idea he was letting a predator into his home. Late on the 6th, going into the early hours of the 7th, Peter's fire alarm goes off. Emergency services were called. Peter is found collapsed inside the house. He's pronounced dead. In the early stages, it appears to be an accident. There's an investigation, and nothing suspicious is identified at the time. An inquest later concludes that Peter's death was accidental, linked to the fire. And when you look at fire deaths, it's not always obvious what happened. In house fires, temperatures can be extreme, and smoke inhalation is often what kills. Pathologists look for soot in the airways to determine if someone was still breathing when the fire started. And in Peter's case, the evidence suggested he was alive when the fire began. Peter also had health issues, including a heart condition. The conclusion was that the smoke inhalation triggered problems with his heart, causing the fatal event. So that was it. A tragedy. A man dies alone in a fire. The case is closed. Except something didn't fit. Because in the hours and days after Peter died, his money was being spent. His credit card was used. A flight was purchased. A ticket from London to Rome. And on 11th of January, a man named Jason Marshall boarded a flight using Peter Fasoli's card. So now the question becomes, how does a man die in an accidental fire and then his finances are immediately accessed by someone else? That's not an accident. That's a clue. But at the time, the truth still hadn't surfaced, because the biggest piece of evidence wasn't in the police station. It was in Peter's home. This is where the case flips backwards, because it wasn't police who found the truth. It was the family. Peter's belongings, what was left after the fire, was stored. Almost 2 years passed. Then Peter's nephew, Christopher, began going through Peter's effects, partly because they shared an interest in family history. He recovered Peter's computer hard drive. He thought he might find family tree stuff, but what he found was a series of webcam recordings. And at first, it looked like adult material, Peter recording consensual encounters. But then, he found the final recording. And the final recording wasn't consensual. It was Peter's last hours. And the most horrifying detail? Peter's webcam was recording. And the man, calling himself Gabriel, didn't know. This was an accidental, silent witness. A camera that never blinked. Police later described the video as shocking and harrowing. The man in the video is dressed to look like a plainclothes police officer. Jeans, bomber jacket, gun in a holster, and an ID badge on a chain. He's performing authority, and for most of the recording, the interaction appears consensual, based around role play. Peter is submissive to that power and authority dynamic. But then something shifts. Right at the end, the mood changes. The suspect becomes violent. He threatens Peter with a knife. He injects him with a needle more than once. And the video captures something chilling. The moment Peter realizes this isn't a game anymore, you can almost see the penny drop. From role play to genuine fear. This is one of the most disturbing parts of cases like this, when consent evaporates and the victim realizes they're trapped. Eventually, it escalates to murder. The man suffocates Peter. Cling film, plastic bag, and Peter collapses. And without knowing it, Peter recorded his own murder. Afterwards, the cuffs are removed, the bag is removed, and the man remains calm. And then the video cuts, but the audio continues. You can hear the sound of liquid being poured. You can hear ignition. And seconds later, the smoke alarm. That's when neighbours were alerted and emergency services were called. So the fire wasn't a tragic accident, it was a cover-up. So why did the original investigation miss this? And this is important, not as a blame game, but as a reality. Fire destroys evidence. A body in a fire can hide bruising, injection sites, injuries, and the initial post-mortem was focused on fire death indicators. Smoke inhalation, soot in airways. Because nobody was looking for a murder, nobody was asking the right questions. And if that hard drive hadn't been recovered, Peter Fasoli would still officially be an accidental fire death, and the killer would have got away with it. Now the police had footage, but initially no name. So they go frame by frame. They look for clues, then they discover something critical. During the night, the suspect demanded Peter's bank card and PIN. Peter's finances were later used for flights, and airline records gave them a name, Jason Marshall. So Gabriel wasn't Gabriel. And when police ran checks on Jason Marshall, they discovered something that made their stomachs drop. He was already known for impersonation, including impersonating authority figures, which fits perfectly with what's on the video. He wasn't just role-playing, he was obsessed with it. Marshall used Peter's cars to travel to Rome, and within days, he used dating apps again. Same method, older gay men, isolated, living alone. He meets Vincenzo Iali, 67, a tour guide living outside Rome. Vincenzo may have expected a sexual encounter. Marshall had a different purpose. Robbery, PIN numbers, control, and then murder. Vincenzo's body is found days later. He had injuries suggesting torture, but the cause of death was ligature strangulation, consistent with an electrical cord. On the very day Vincenzo is found, Marshall is moving towards his next victim, Umberto Ghizzoni. Same setup, dinner, then sudden violence, pepper spray, binding, gagging, attempted suffocation. And here's the part that turns your blood cold. Umberto later said Marshall showed him a picture and implied he'd killed before, using fear as leverage to get PIN numbers. But Umberto survives. Neighbours hear the commotion. Police are called. Marshall flees, but Italian police track him via phone data and arrest him within hours. When he's arrested, he's carrying items that echo the UK case: credit cards, a key, pepper spray, fake weapon, and a counterfeit badge. He even claims he works for MI5, a lifelong fantasist, but a dangerous one. In 2014 in Italy, Marshall is convicted and sentenced to 16 years, So at this point, he's locked up in Italy. Before the UK even realises Peter's death was murder, that's how back to front this case is. Once the webcam footage is handed in and the UK police identify Marshall, the next step is bringing him back. Eventually, he's extradited, and then he stands trial in London. Marshall claims amnesia, but the prosecution focuses on what he did after the murder. The messages sent on the dating app, the calculated spending, the travel to Rome, the pattern repeating. That's not amnesia, that's planning. And the webcam footage is devastating. It places him at the scene. It captures the escalation. It captures the murder. It captures the cover-up. You can't talk your way out of that. The jury returns a unanimous guilty verdict, quickly. Marshall is sentenced to life, with a minimum of 39 years. The judge describes him as sadistic, and the court conclusion is clear. He tortured Peter for hours before killing him. This case isn't just horrific because of the violence. It's horrific because of the method. It shows how quickly consensual can become coercion when someone weaponizes authority, fear, and isolation. It also shows how dangerous a closed case can be when one key detail is missing. And for me, the most haunting part of this, if Christopher hadn't recovered that hard drive, Peter would still be remembered as a man who tragically died in a faulty light bulb fire. And the truth, the real truth, would have burned with the evidence. Peter Fasoli didn't deserve this. He invited someone into his home looking for connection, and instead he met a man who treated human beings like opportunities. Opportunities to control, to steal, to hurt. And the only reason we know what happened is because a webcam was quietly recording in the corner of a room. A silent witness, a piece of evidence that survived fire, time, and distance, long enough to finally speak for him. And it's a reminder, sometimes the difference between accident and murder is simply whether anyone thought to look again.
It's just very upsetting, you know, and to think that I might be the last friendly face that these two girls had to speak to.
At first, he looked like a concerned witness, helping police search for two missing schoolgirls. But the truth was far darker. In August 2002, 10-year-old friends Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman vanished from the quiet town of Soham, Cambridgeshire, while walking to buy sweets. The whole country joined the search, but the man speaking to the cameras already knew what happened. What Ian Huntley did was so shocking, it would horrify the entire nation. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were best of friends in the truest sense of the word. They were both 10 years old, both from loving families, both inseparable. Holly, born to Kevin and Nicola Wells, was a little quieter. Jessica, daughter of Les and Sharon Chapman, was more outgoing. But the two balanced each other perfectly. Family and friends said they bounced off one another constantly, laughing, playing, talking, and very rarely ever apart. They loved football. They loved being outside. And after Jessica had returned from holiday, the girls were due a proper catch-up. On Sunday the 4th of August 2002, Jessica walked from her home on Brook Street to Holly's house in Red House Gardens. It was only about 10 minutes away. That afternoon the girls played games, listened to music, and later changed into matching Manchester United shirts with David Beckham on the back, their favourite player. Just after 5 p.m, Holly asked her mum to take a photograph of them together in those shirts. It would become one of the most haunting images in modern British criminal history. The girls are smiling, relaxed, happy, safe, and neither they nor their families could have known that within little more than an hour, they would be gone. After dinner, the girls went back upstairs and carried on playing on the computer. Then, sometime after 6:15 p.m, they left the house without telling anyone. They were likely just going to buy some sweets. They knew the area well. There was nothing unusual about that. At around 6:30 p.m, CCTV captured them near the Sports Centre car park. At 6:33 p.m, they were seen on College Road and College Close. Then, nothing. By 8 p.m, both families realised the girls were not where they were supposed to be. The girls were reported missing just before 10 p.m. And from the beginning, people knew this was serious.
They haven't been missing before. Very well balanced, very bright young girls.
Holly and Jessica were not children who would run off. They had never gone missing before. They knew the area. They were sensible girls. They were loved, and they were expected home. Soham went into shock almost instantly. The search operation grew rapidly. People from multiple forces joined the effort. Search teams covered fields, roads, drains, ditches, and school grounds. Hundreds of local people turned out to help. The girl's photograph, the one in the football shirts, was released to the media, and soon the whole country knew their faces. The case exploded into one of the largest missing child investigations Britain had ever seen. David Beckham even issued a personal appeal, telling the girls they were not in trouble and urging them to come home. But the more time passed, the more one possibility became impossible to ignore. These girls had not simply wandered off. And because Holly and Jessica had been taught not to talk to strangers, police began to suspect they may have gone with somebody they knew, or at least someone they trusted enough not to be frightened by. That detail would become crucial. One man was very keen to speak to the police and the media. That man was Ian Huntley, the 28-year-old caretaker at Soham Village College. He claimed he had seen the girls on the evening they vanished. In fact, he suggested he had been the last person to speak to them. And very quickly, he became a familiar face on television.
It doesn't help the fact that I was one of the last people to speak to them, if not the last person to speak to them. I keep reliving that conversation and thinking perhaps something different could have been said. Perhaps kept them here a little bit longer and maybe changed events.
At first glance, he seemed helpful, calm, cooperative. He spoke like a concerned local man caught up in a community tragedy. But as the interviews continued, something about him started to feel off. He inserted himself into the story repeatedly. He talked to reporters. He reflected on possibly being the last friendly face the girls had ever seen. He seemed almost drawn to the spotlight, and people noticed. They noticed the way he seemed to want to manage where his interview footage was shown. They noticed a strange self-consciousness of a man trying to appear normal. One of the most unsettling details came from his partner, Maxine Carr. Maxine was a teaching assistant at the girls' primary school. Holly and Jessica adored her. They drew her pictures, wrote her notes, trusted her. But during one television interview, Maxine referred to the girls in the past tense.
She was very, very upset because I didn't get my job, and she just gave me this with a poem on the inside saying to a special teaching assistant, really, and we'll miss her a lot and we'll see her in the future. And that's the kind of girl she was. She was just lovely, really lovely.
That's really very sweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maxine, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. That's very kind.
A small detail, perhaps, but enough to make the journalists and detectives pause. Not proof, but strange. And in a case like this, strange matters. As the investigation tightened, investigators started retracing every last confirmed movement of the girls. They looked again at the route, the CCTV, the witness sightings, the timing, the phone data. And one thing became increasingly hard to ignore. No one had seen Holly and Jessica pass College Close. And that area was right by the school, right by Ian Huntley's house. Further analysis showed Jessica's phone had been manually switched off, not long after 6:37 p.m, and the last signal was near Soham Village College. That put the girls in exactly the same area that Ian Huntley lived. At best, he knew more than he was saying. At worst, he was involved. Police began monitoring him more closely, and what they saw did nothing to reassure them. He was losing weight, not sleeping, crying, asking officers whether they thought he'd done it. At one point, he casually asked how long DNA remains around for, and officers noticed scratches on his face. He claimed they came from his dog. By now, suspicion was no longer just building, it was circling him. Then the story widened. People in Huntley's hometown of Grimsby saw him on TV and started contacting journalists. They had things to say, dark things. It emerged that Huntley had a disturbing background of alleged sexual violence, controlling behaviour and abuse. There had been allegations involving underage girls. Former partners described him as manipulative, aggressive and frightening. He had groomed a 15-year-old. He had threatened women. He had lied, controlled and intimidated. Most of it had never resulted in convictions, but it painted a clear picture of the sort of man police were now dealing with. And that picture was getting uglier by the day. When police brought Huntley and Maxine in for a voluntary interview, Maxine initially gave him an alibi. She said she had been home with him that night. It wasn't true. Maxine had actually been in Grimsby. That meant two things. First, Huntley had no alibi. And second, Maxine was lying to protect him. Still, at that stage, police did not have enough to arrest and charge them, so they went back to the school. This time, the search was more focused, more forensic, more determined. And finally, they found something concrete. In a bin beneath a black bag, officers discovered the charred remains of 2 Manchester United shirts. The shirts Holly and Jessica had been wearing. That was the moment the case changed. Chris Stevenson, the senior investigating officer, later said he cried when he got that call, because he knew exactly what it meant. They finally had enough.
In the last few hours, a 28-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman have been arrested. The 28-year-old man has been arrested for the murder and abduction of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. The 25-year-old woman has been arrested for the murder of both girls. They have been taken to separate police stations in Cambridgeshire, where they will be interviewed.
Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were arrested. Then, nearly 2 weeks after Holly and Jessica vanished, the worst was confirmed. 2 bodies were found in woodland near an RAF base at Lakenheath, around 12 miles away. Although formal identification took time, police already knew. It was Holly and Jessica. The nation went quiet. The hope, however faint it had become, vanished in an instant, because now there were no more searches, no more appeals, no more waiting for them to come home. Only grief. Post-mortem evidence suggested the girls likely died of asphyxiation. Their bodies had been moved and an attempt had been made to burn them. Because of decomposition and the fire damage, the exact sequence of events could never be fully established. But what mattered by then was this. The girls had been murdered, and the evidence linking Huntley kept growing. Fibres from the shirts matched his clothing and boots. His DNA was found on the bin liner. Material on the underside of his car matched the route to where the girls' bodies were found. He had changed all 4 tyres and altered details in the garage records just 1 day after the girls disappeared. He had lied, cleaned, hidden, disposed, and now the case was closing around him. At the Old Bailey in 2003, Ian Huntley stood trial for murder. To this day, the exact moment and method by which he lured the girls into the house has never been fully proven. But many believe he exploited the fact that his partner Maxine was a trusting teaching assistant at their school. The girls may have felt safe going inside because of that connection. Huntley's defence was as pathetic as it was insulting. He claimed the deaths were accidental. He said one of the girls had a nosebleed, that he took them inside to help, that Holly somehow fell into the bath and drowned. He had then accidentally suffocated Jessica while trying to keep her from screaming. The prosecution called it what it was, a desperate lie from a man trying to control the narrative to the very end. Maxine Carr also took the stand, claiming she had lied only because she feared Huntley would be wrongly accused. The jury didn't buy it. In December 2003, Ian Huntley was convicted of the murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 40 years. Maxine Carr was convicted of perverting the course of justice. The case triggered huge national questions. How had Ian Huntley been allowed to work in a school? or had warning signs in the past not been properly recorded or shared. The inquiry that followed exposed serious failings in police intelligence sharing and vetting procedures. It led to major reforms in child protection, recruitment checks, and information sharing across forces. So while nothing could ever undo what happened to Holly and Jessica, their murders changed the system because they had to. Maxine Carr was released, and due to her own safety, she was given a new identity. Now, she is living somewhere, married, with her own child. However, things were very different for Huntley. Over the years, he's been attacked repeatedly in prison. Boiling water has been thrown over him. His throat has been slashed. He was targeted again and again. The predictable fate of a man convicted of murdering two 10-year-old girls. And then, in 2026, it finally caught up with him. On the 26th of February 2026, Huntley was attacked at HMP Frankland and suffered catastrophic head injuries. A fellow inmate, Anthony Russell, was later charged with his murder. Huntley was taken to hospital, placed on life support, and died on the 7th of March 2026 after treatment was withdrawn. Reports said he had been struck repeatedly with a metal bar or pole and was left with severe brain trauma. He had remained on life support for around a week before doctors concluded there was no realistic prospect of recovery. Russell, 43, has since appeared in court charged with his murder. And while the legal process around Huntley's death will take its course, one thing is obvious. There will be no sympathy for Ian Huntley. The sympathy belongs where it always should have been, with Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, and the families who have had to live with this horror since August 2002. What happened in Soham was one of the darkest crimes modern Britain has ever seen. Two 10-year-old girls left home to buy sweets on a summer evening in a place they knew well. They never made it back. And the man who spoke to the cameras, who inserted himself into the search, who stood there pretending to care, was the one who had taken them. This is why this case still haunts people. Not just because of the murders themselves, but because of the betrayal. Holly and Jessica were children. They were happy, kind, sporty, loved, and for one awful evening, they crossed paths with a predator who should never have been anywhere near a school, let alone trusted by a community. Their names endure. He deserves only contempt.